All right, hi everybody. Again, bit of a different video, different format from the way I usually shoot these things. Obviously, this isn't going to be one of those videos where you're going to see me typing or ones that you're going to see shot like in the comic rotoscope style frame. Today I'm doing a video. This one is very long overdue. I've mentioned before that at some point I'm going to do a video on just going into more detail on my two writing projects. The reason for that is I continually refer to my projects usually as like the one I've been doing for Write Every Day, and the one for the publisher is usually what I refer to it as. And that, to be honest, I feel like that's getting confusing for people. I mean that's something that needs to be clarified more, and I've been pretty ambiguous about what the projects are. So I'm going to do two videos the next couple days, going into detail on both projects. And so today's video is going to be on the first of my projects. It's the one that is for the publisher. So I'm going to go into that a bit more, what that is, what I'm working on, and what the nature of the project is. That way, when I refer to it, you'll know what I'm talking about, basically, for future videos. So this story is called Tarot. It's a novel. It was originally a middle grade novel. It was about a 9-year-old child who is homeless, who lives with their mother, who is a scam artist tarot reader. And the pair basically travel the country living out of a station wagon, and she goes town to town to town, sort of working her cons at different conventions, at different events as a tarot reader to basically make enough money under the table just to get by. That was the project that I'm doing right now for the publisher. So a little bit, I guess, on the background of the story first. I ended up writing this story for my MFA. So when I went to grad school, this was my project. I came up with it during my sophomore year, and I spent 3 semesters writing it and getting it completed. I was able to get it done in about that year and a half time frame, and I ended up shortly after doing that and getting it completed there, I ended up querying it to several agents. With the process of querying, it takes a very long time. I ended up spending probably about 6 months or so, like intermittently querying and just going through and doing more revisions as I queried. As a general rule, you should always query something that's like immediately ready to be sent off. So the moment you query, your book should be completely done. You should not be doing it the way I did. My book, I felt, was complete as it was when I was querying it, but when you start querying, a sort of like self-doubt starts to set in. Often, at least for me, I started feeling this very self-doubt, very self-conscious about the project. I felt like what I did was good, but it could be better, so I was continually making revisions throughout that entire process. Well, over the course of the 6-month time frame, I didn't hear back from some agents. I heard back from other ones with these very, polite declines that ranged from just standardized form, yep, thanks for sending it, we're not interested, to this isn't a good fit, to ones that are a bit more personal, like, hey, this was good, I kind of like this, but I can't really fit this into my catalog, or I don't know how I could, sell this or something like that, till eventually I had gotten one agent. So one agent had sat down with me. Basically, what it was a very preliminary thing. We simply sat down, discussed the novel, basically over a Zoom call. This was at this was the first year, of COVID, so I think it was 2020, I think. So we did a quick Zoom call, basically, over the course of about an hour. I went over the project. They laid out what they would want to see done to the novel if they were to pick it up. So they just went over, if I was to take this on, I want these changes to be made. There were several that they were looking for at the time. I felt like the changes basically conflicted a bit with my vision for what I wanted the story to be and what I wanted the book to look like. So basically we didn't go for it. It was a very preliminary thing, just a quick Zoom call. They let out what they wanted. I sort of thought it over and didn't agree with it, and we didn't go for it. So that's it. So I did not get an agent for that process at all. So for the querying part of it, I got no agent out of it at all. What happened then was I ended up querying one small publisher. So that this was an independent publisher, basically based out of Australia. I knew someone who actually got published through them at the time. They recommended them, and the stuff they published was stuff that they were willing to take a risk on. It was stuff that was written very well, but maybe it was a bit niche. It didn't necessarily have the biggest mass market appeal, the biggest mass market appeal, which I've always felt that sort of my story tends to not have. Despite the fact that you might think, well, a homeless child traveling across the country with their mother. Yeah, I've maybe seen that before. Maybe I've heard of that. It sounds very original, but I'm sure I'm sure a lot of people may want to read it. It's always felt very, very niche the way I've done it. So I ended up querying them. What happened was this was back at the end of December, I believe. So, and December comes around. I wait about. I'd say probably about a month, basically, and they finally get back to me saying, yes, we like your letter, we like your initial pages, send us the full manuscript. So I sent it off. And what happened was, I believe it was back in March now, that I heard back from them, basically with I'm not sure what you would call it, but it was a sort of, this isn't a good fit for us at the moment, but make these changes, and we'll be interested actually in taking a look at it again and going forward. So that's what I've been doing now. So basically the changes they outlined were what I've mentioned before in other videos. They're specifically looking to change the voice of the character. I mentioned the story was told from about a 9-year-old girl. It's told in first person, and the way I wrote it was in present tense. So it was from a 9-year-old child's perspective in the immediate experience. So this was not any kind of past reflection or anything like that. This was simply the child experiencing the world, where you as the reader would experience it as the child experiences at the same time. They want it to be rewritten with them as an adult looking back on their life instead. Part of it is, I mentioned before, is that my prose, it tends to be a bit, I don't want to say elegant because that sounds very arrogant, but it sounds very adult. Like my prose sometimes can sound very adult. It tends to have more run-on, sort of more run-on sentences. It's less like short, kind of punchy sentences. It's less like a kid would write. So they wanted to see it basically written as an adult looking back on their life, partly for the prose, partly because they were more interested in seeing an adult perspective on how that childhood affected them and sort of shaped them. And so that's what I've been doing now. That's basically what leads me to the current project with this and where I'm at. So right now, I'm working on both doing the changes to the story, where I'm just simply going through and making revisions. So I'm going through, I am changing just the tense, obviously the past tense. I am changing the way the speaking, more the voice of the character to more of an adult voice. So I'm going through making those changes. At the same time, I've also added new sections now. This revision has given me a sort of opportunity to expand the story a bit. They mentioned obviously that looking to perhaps see how the experience might have shaped the character. What I've done now is I've done all of the story about the 9-year-old girl, but now I'm also interspersing chapters with the main character in the present as well. So what you're getting are the past story, the past events that I wrote about her being a child, being homeless, and mixed in with the present tense, with the present timeline, basically, of them as an adult now closing in on about 30 years old, and just what they've experienced since that happened. There's a lot of reconciliation with their parental figures, with the mother specifically, basically over what occurred, and that's basically where the sort of the drama in the present tense leads. So that's what I'm doing. So it's a past, it's a mix of the present tense, the present storyline and a past storyline mixed together. So that's what I'm working on right now. That is the challenge. So again, whenever I refer to the novel for the publisher, whenever I say I'm working on that other novel, that's what I'm referring to as Tarot. Tarot is the name of the book. I'm just going to probably go forward and just call it Tarot, going forward here, just so that everyone's clear. But that is the project. So that is what I'm working on. That is one of my 2 books, or yeah, that's the first of the 2 books that I'm working on right now with writing. Going a bit more into the book, just in case anyone's more curious about what the book's about. Like I said, it's about a 9-year-old girl who's lives her life on the road with their mother. The book deals with a sort of coming of age for the character. It deals with them coming to understand their circumstances. The book starts off with them very ignorant of their life. It sounds weird because you're like, well, they're homeless. They would know they're homeless. The main character lives their life in a sort of state of ignorance about it. They tend to find that life on the road is actually very fun. There's a lot of joy to it. They're also perpetually lied to by their mother at the start of the story. At the start of the story, the character has been homeless for most of her entire life. Her earliest memories basically are of them being homeless. She does not recall her ever having like a home, ever having a father or anything like that. It's only as we go along that's sort of brought back to the character. But they do not recall that. In fact, the character lives their life, the child, actually believing that her mother really is a tarot reader. Like in other words, that she actually can read minds. That's basically how the book starts off. She believes her mother can actually read minds. She thinks her mother basically is a superhero in a very real sense. She's not aware that the whole thing by her mom is a con, just so they can make money to get to sort of skate by. She believes it's very real. She's a very naive child. And a lot of her life is framed from that context of believing her mother's a superhero. So she lives her life within the context of thinking that they're on this sort of like adventurous journey and that they're the good guys, sort of helping the world and all this. And as the story goes on, she becomes more aware. Like her ignorance goes away. She becomes more aware of the lies and the deceit and all that stuff. And that rolls into what happens later in the novel with the plot and what occurs with the plot. I won't go into kind of spoilers, but that's what the story in more detail is about. Really, it's about a child coming of age and sort of throwing off the childish ignorance for this very sort of cynical adulthood in a very, very kind of dramatic shift. So that is the story. That is basically the I guess the basic summary of what the story is about and kind of the process and what I've been going through and where I'm at the moment with the story. As far as timeline goes, I don't know. I've mentioned before that I'm hoping to have this thing done. I mean, my goal is by the end of the year. My goal is by the end of the year to have this whole thing done by the end of the year. That's the long-term goal. More of my stretch goal, more of what I'm trying to really achieve here is by like early September, like early fall, to really have this whole thing done, which gives me about 4 months to do it. It's a bit of a tight deadline, I know, but I tend to have a bit... I'm presently, at the moment, have quite a bit of free time on my hands to get this project done. It's probably the first time in my life that I'm not juggling like full-time work or a bunch of side jobs with my writing. I'm completely devoted at the moment to my writing. So I've been very, very fortunate. I can't say how much longer that's going to last. It could be a few more months, which will be great. It could be another month. It could be next week. There's a new job opportunity that comes up for me, and I take that, and I'm all of a sudden back into the regular world again. So I don't know how much longer I'll have, but that is my timeline of having this done basically by the early fall to have the whole story redone.